That's Sarah? All right. Okay. Will you do the pledge, as always? Okay. Good morning. Sarah and I are your chairs today and yesterday, and we hope tomorrow too. And Sarah, if you'll start up with the Pledge of Allegiance, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. If we'll all
Where's
face the flag here, and we'll start. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
But I went to school, didn't say under God. All right. Well, we got a grand turnout in Lucy Rockefeller's redo. This is really a beautiful building, extraordinary. And what we do now is to introduce ourselves to and that includes all the audience. And we'll start on my left with Sarah.
Sarah Griffin, acting chair of the Greenway Conservancy.
Mark Castiglione, acting executive director of the Greenway Council.
Mark Molinaro. I'm actually the county executive. I'm not acting. County executive.
Scott Keller, Trails and Special Projects Director and Finance Manager for the Greenway and National Heritage Area.
Bob Elliott, Council Board Member.
Charles Rudera, Empire State Development, representing Ken Adams, Commissioner of Economic Development.
Freddie Garcia from Marist College, representing Dennis Murray.
Ted Putney, Albany County Representative.
Sally Mazzarella, representing Senator Steve Salan and Walkway over the Hudson.
Kevin Burke, Greenway Conservancy, board member.
Don Mara, Greenway Conservancy.
Kathleen Bukowski, Columbia County Representative from Greenway Council.
Amy Shore,
Town Supervisor.
Hi, John Clark, Dutchess County Planning and Development.
Peter Fairweather, Fairweather Consulting.
Andy Schmarl, Putnam County Representative of the Communities Council.
Steve Rosenberg, Scenic Hudson.
Betsy Jacks, Thomas Cole National Historic Site.
Linda Vonderheader, Runcer County Greenway Communities Council member.
Jennifer Schwartz Berkey, member at large of the Conservancy.
Fran Dunwell, Hudson River Estuary Program, DEC, representing Commissioner Martens.
Stefan Yarabek, Greenway Conservancy and Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area.
Lisa Weiss, representing Bill Gordon, representing Commissioner McDonald at New York State Department of Transportation.
Jane Daniels, Conservancy Board Member.
Cindy Lancetta, Conservancy Member.
And now on the right, in red.
Susan Rowland Brown, Grant Consultant.
Governor Reading representative.
Al?
Al Lanzetta, husband of Miss Cindy Lanzetta. Hank Osborne, New York, New Jersey Trail Conference.
Aaron Salt, Wappinger Greenway, and the official historian for the village of Wappinger Falls, and the chairman of the Randall from the Southern Dutchess area. And I remember when county executive there used to be the designated driver for the Greenway.
It's true.
That's how long you've been there.
Linda Cooper, the regional director here at State Parks, Connie Creation, and I'm representing the at-large representative representing Parks on behalf of Commissioner Rose Hart. And, excuse me, Mr. Chair, at the end of this, if you want to talk to anybody about this building at some appropriate time,
That's it?
Now we have a few more. Go ahead.
Lucy Hayes, Executive Director of Winnebago Land Trust.
Laura Healy, Hudson River Estuary Program.
Andrew Meyer, Hudson River Estuary Program.
Kevin Calzeri, Village of Cold Spring.
Diane Dinker, grateful kayaker for all the work that the Greenway organization has done to make it a great place to live in New York.
Mary Zimmer from the town of Solis.
Fred Zimmer, Marion's husband.
Tom Martinelli, Martinelli Custom Publishing, Amtrak New York by Rail Magazine.
Kathleen Davis, Town Hyde Park Recreation Director and Hyde Park Trails Coordinator.
Eric Ross, Wilhelm Reserve, and
Thank you very much. Ladies first, I mean, we're delighted this is the third time you've welcomed us.
I have.
And I hope it'll be 3 more times.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hyde Park's hidden gem of Staatsburg. It's one of our hamlets, and I have to just say what a pleasure it is for me to be here, and actually an honor. My parents both taught in this school back in the 50s and 60s, and I myself am a graduate in 1970. And just reflecting on that for a moment, you know, the changes that our society, our county, our town, our community have undergone in those 43 years, it's pretty amazing. But one of the highlights really is how we now really value the beauty of the Hudson Valley and the emphasis on good planning, really inspired by Greenway. So I want to thank them for their wonderful contribution to our community, to our whole Hudson Valley, and basically welcome you all here. Thank you very much, and enjoy the time with Greenway.
And now, a few words from Marvelous Mark. And the thing is that, well, come on. You saved us twice, you know.
Well, 3 times is the charm, I guess. I went from the designated driver to Marvelous Mark. Barney, thank you very much, and thank all of you for sustaining the great work of the Hudson River Valley Greenway. As was noted, I have been and remain a strong supporter and advocate of the work that we do together, because this is where really the stakeholders in the Hudson River Valley come together to talk about development, to talk about the preservation of our natural resources and great assets, and really building a plan for the right kind of sustainable growth throughout the Hudson River Valley. And there is no one else who can speak in the collective voice that the Greenway can. We are at a time, I think, where government seems to be far too interested in closing things down rather than opening things up. And the dialogue that the Greenway has maintained and kept open is really critical to where we take our communities next. Today, you'll be hearing some presentation from Dutchess County's Department of Planning and Development, John Clark, who is really among perhaps our greatest assets, singularly in his person. John has been instrumental in assisting municipalities really across Dutchess County to develop sustainable master and comprehensive plans, plans to preserve open space, and planning efforts to develop our centers, both urban and village and hamlet centers. What you'll see is that Dutchess County remains committed to the Greenway principles and continues to expand our compact in the hope that the towns, villages, and cities in Dutchess embrace this same sort of collaborative development model that really has served this region well for, I don't know, at least 200 years. Beyond that, I will tell you that the government at our level, county governments, are really being pressured. And I half-kiddingly suggest that other layers of government closing things down. We seem to be consumed with the concept that if I have an idea, I'm not supposed to compromise it, and would much rather see those of you who have a different idea lose than to have a good idea win. That's unfortunate. It's happening in Washington in clear and direct view. I am thrilled that we are at a state park and state historic site because they are open for business, despite the fact that at the height of our tourism season, the federal government, in its inimitable ability to do all things wrong, has decided through paralysis to close our national parks and historic sites, which really will have a crippling effect on a number of our small businesses in and around this community. Dutchess County last week opened and completed on time and under budget the Dutchess Rail Trail, a connection of near, thank you, really the vision of my predecessor, Bill Steinhaus, and community advocate Fred Schaefer to build a linear park from East Fishkill to the Hudson River, from Hopewell to the Hudson. And thanks to the work of the Walkway over the Hudson, Rob Dyson, the Dyson Foundation, and Senator Chuck Schumer, we've been able to complete the connection between the Dutchess Rail Trail and the walkway over the Hudson, ultimately bringing about 30-plus miles of rail trail and trail connections in Dutchess and Ulster County. Imagine the economic benefit. Beyond that, municipalities, thanks to the great work of the walkway over the Hudson and Scenic Hudson, communities are embracing zoning code and land use policies that integrate these great trails and pedestrian access points into their development models, all very important. I want to end with one plea, and that is that while the development pressure on the Hudson Valley has to a degree subsided, I know I'm so youthful and young, but I've been around for 20 years in elected office, and when I started, we were reacting to this suburbanization, if you will, this mauling of America in an effort to try to preserve our historic hamlets, our open spaces, and our urban centers. Well, that development pressure has subsided to a degree, and there are some people in elected office today, most of whom serve in the state legislature, and I will refrain from being critical, that don't have the same historical context that others do. That the pressure for gobbling up open space and farmland, destroying our estuaries and natural resources, and really taking away from our urban and village centers, that pressure came upon us in the blink of an eye. And we have but a moment now, as that pressure has subsided, to really put into place good and strong practices to protect ourselves and guide developers in the right direction, to create sustainable communities, sustainable economic development, development that understands and appreciates and partners with our natural and human assets. We have that ability now while the pressure is subsided. But because there isn't that historical context, communities like ours are being pressured to do other things, mandated by Albany and Washington to do their things, to spend our local resources on their services. John Clark is discretionary. I don't mean that as an insult, but Albany says that the planning department of Dutchess County government is discretionary, that we could eliminate it in order to pay for Medicaid and early intervention services and God knows what else, stop signs and whatever else New York wants us to spend money on. And every day those costs ratchet up, $1, $1, $1 more, is one day that we have one less dollar to commit to the kind of work that we have done collectively, the things that residents expect from us. We have asked the state legislature to, and our legislative delegation to present a mechanism for Dutchess County to generate the revenue necessary to maintain our open space preservation program, $6 million that we would like to commit to farmland and open space preservation. This county led through the Greenway Compact and created this open space preservation model, which then led several municipalities to do the same. We have protected thousands of acres of active farmland and natural resources in Dutchess County, and we'd like to preserve thousands more. We'd like to marry that with a commitment to invest in infrastructure so that we can guide development into our urban and village centers. And you can only do that if you drive down the cost of development. We do that by providing water, wastewater, and sewer services, drainage services. So by marrying an open space bond, $6 million for preservation of open space, with an equal amount for infrastructure, Dutchess County can continue to guide development, protect our open space and green spaces while developing in and around our centers. We don't have the resources to do it alone. We're not asking Albany to pay for it. We're asking Albany to give us the local authority through a mortgage recording tax to do that. There are some who oppose it, in fact some who celebrate the fact that they have blocked our ability to do this. I'd like them to celebrate something that would reduce the cost to county government, something that was positive. I am sickened by the continued celebration of people saying no to things. And I'm a red-blooded Republican. I just happen to think that we have but a moment now to do this right, and that the Greenway has been our mechanism throughout the region to help us do things better. So the plea to all of you is not to beat up on our state legislators. I don't have any interest in doing that. I will tell you that we have a great delegation who works hard, but I think they need the historical context. They need to appreciate the fact that we can lead now before it gets worse. And if we speak in one voice, if we speak collectively, if we speak in a partnership and a collaborative way, we can do that. We've had great response from Assemblywoman Barrett. I'm grateful to her. we need similar response from others. So to the extent you can help us, I guess I would end by being self-serving and say what Barney said, and that is, I have stood by you on a number of occasions and will continue to do so. But counties like ours need the partnership and they need the leadership that you present so that we can be an example for the country on the kind of development and the kind of priorities that put people first, that put resources first, and that create development models that preserve the great landscapes, the great vistas, the great resources of the Hudson River Valley. So thank you for allowing me to speak again. Thank you for the work that you do, and we continue, Dutchess County, to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Thanks.
Okay, you get John. My grandmother used to say, not all Republicans are bad, and the thing is, and that's a good example of what happened.
Thank God for your
But
grandmother.
that's it, yeah.
My guess is she's not voting for me.
Early and often. And the thing is that...
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your day here, and thank Lucy Waletsky when you see her.
Thank you. As long as we're talking about history, the Greenway would not have been here but for the father of Lucy Rockefeller, actually Lucy Rockefeller Waletsky, who I guess put up most of the money to do over this building it's a splendid building. And Lawrence Rockefeller, her father, was the one who convinced Cuomo père to come up with the Greenway. And so it is all in one big ball. And talking about big ball, we've got John Clark, who has a pretty tough guy when it comes to development and planning. And he learned it from Roger Akeley, who's, I guess, still going around the world, right?
Yes.
And but John Clark, you still live in that? You still have in that old tie factory? Is that where you are still?
That's what. Yeah.
Yeah, Countess Mara ties. When I was growing up, that's what you'd get. And but it was the Dutchess County Planning Department that led the way for the Greenway for the compacts, because you could have trails and some nice ideas, but compacts are really important. And it was you and Roger who made that happen. And we're delighted to be in your territory again and in your thrall. John.
Thank you for all the kind words. Greenway Connections was adopted by this body in 2000, which seems like a long time ago. Since then, 29 out of the 30 municipalities in Dutchess County have adopted this and cross-referenced it in their zoning and subdivision regulations.
Who's the one who didn't? It's not in our...
Is anybody here from the town of Stanford? I thought not. There's always one. We remind you that the Greenway Compact is entirely voluntary. It's for expects home rule and relies on incentives and guidelines. And part of the original compact, which was considered at the time a model for the other 13 counties in the Hudson Valley region, was to incorporate what we call Greenway guides, which are front and back of one page on one topic, so that it's easy, highly illustrated, useful for a planning board member to pull out during the middle of a meeting and consult if you wanted to find out what parking specifications or what, with the spacing on street trees or how to do a conservation subdivision. So over half of our communities have updated their comprehensive plans and master plans to be consistent with this document. We think that's a real plus for the county, and we see tangible results on the ground because of all the Greenway principles that have been fostered over the years. But this plan is getting old, and what we've been doing is, at the request of certain people, municipal leaders, Mark Molinaro asked us to do a couple guides on street specs, which we'll see today, when he was state senator. We've updated that by adding, hopefully, with your assent, 7 new guidelines on topics that are pertinent to today's issues. So I'm going to introduce those quickly. We don't have much time. The first one is slower, safer streets. It's how to design streets in local communities. Too many communities have outdated street regulations that are from the 60s and 70s based on suburban models. We want to narrow down the streets, make the streets more walkable, more bikeable, and more friendly to business. All that goes together. So what we have, and these are just excerpts from the slide to show the flavor of it, not the full text and everything. But we have one on how to design streets and centers. And so it has street sections, illustrations from local examples that people can go out and visit and see to design a street that looks like a successful main street rather than, a commercial highway. We complemented that with a second guide on rural roads, designed primarily for roads under 400 vehicles per day, but could be used flexibly for a lot of different types of narrow and character building type roadways out in the rural areas. Here's a couple of examples on a rural collector road and a rural access road. You can see the widths are very narrow, 20 to 22 feet wide or 18 to 20 feet wide. Those are the historic roads that we all love. Why are we designing highways out in the rural area that just encourage people to drive 60 miles an hour instead of 30 or 40 miles an hour? A third guide on building bicycle networks. We somewhat ignored bikes in the first pass. Emily Dozier from our planning department is a bike fanatic, and she came up with the idea for this and did all of the work on it that you'll see. It sets out 5 different types of bike facilities and gives guidelines for each, where they're appropriate and where they're not, and reminds us that a quarter of our trips are less than a mile long that we could easily do on a bicycle. And so we should be doing much more than the minimal amount of biking we do today. And Emily is updating the department's bike and pedestrian plan as we speak, and so you'll see more. And that's a wealth of information. This is 2 pages. That's going to be the complete listing of all you ever want to know of bike and pedestrian issues. Another Greenway guide on green infrastructure. This was actually at the behest and hard work of the Dutchess County EMC. Steve McCabery out there led the effort, came up with the original draft, and worked with me on the final edited version. It's how to do natural drainage systems, how to incorporate systems that allow the water to penetrate rather than being piped off and not replenishing the groundwater. And you can see the case study is on this building right here. We see this as a real model for the county and the state. So it incorporates things like, adaptively reusing an existing building rather than taking down fields and farms to build new systems. Converting an underground culvert that ran through the back end of the property and piped water away from the site into a natural stream and pond, which you should look at before you leave. It's beautiful. Very successful. And then, things like permeable paving, rain gardens, and all the rest of the issues that were involved in green infrastructure. This guide is on recycling and waste collection, not the most popular of topics, but an essential one. And this one was spearheaded by Lindsay Carrill from our planning department, now Deputy Commissioner of Solid Waste Management. So it talks about how to make recycling routine and also how to design successful collection sites, dumpsters, so that those things aren't unsightly, and how they contribute to a site rather than look awful on every corner. And one of the incentives is to get people to share facilities, so that instead of having 5 dumpsters behind 5 buildings and 5 parking lots and 5 driveways, that you can have shared driveways, shared facilities, so that it makes it more efficient to pick up trash. This is a real issue in Dutchess County, and I'm sure everywhere around the region. Every major corner is being targeted for a gas station with a gigantic canopy and 16 pumps, and a convenience store set behind a parking lot. And so we've come up with a series of guidelines to show you how you can design a gas station convenience store that fits into a village setting or a highway setting. The basic rule is put the building up front and the pumps in the back. And that's hard for the gas station community to swallow, but it has worked. You can see as a case study, the village of Rhinebeck. This was the original plan. This is what we recommended, and this is what was actually built. And it looks like this, and it's been very successful, and we're extending sidewalks out to it, so it'll be incorporated as part of the village. And then the final guide, which I'm going to spend a little more time on, is centers and green spaces, which is an overall regional guideline. It's the one that we think encapsulates the big picture, which in 2000 we were a little reticent to do because we didn't want to step on any local home rule feelings. But we think that it's necessary, and we've done enough homework and trial runs at the local level to say that this works. What we call centers and green spaces. It defines, first of all, defines what smart growth means, which nobody seems to understand, but this in 3 bullets tells you what isn't smart growth. And the idea is that every community should look at building close-knit connected centers in order to save their landscape legacy. And so it encourages communities in their comprehensive plan processes and zoning to target areas where they would like to see development go, where it be supportive of community, where it would build on existing infrastructure, and to also identify places they would like to save. And so it allows communities, instead of just putting out lofty goals, to actually start to identify sites which are good for development and bad for development, which is a big step. But what we've done is we've worked with different communities, 6 different communities, to come up with centers and green spaces and to test it and see how it worked and what's easy to understand and what it's not. The issue is what we've been building for the last 30 years is strip and sprawl patterns, what I call strip and sprawl. And you can see it here. This is a map of Dutchess County. The strips are in red. It's the commercial sites along all our major highways. The sprawl is the yellow, which is creeping up every valley, every roadway. And if you follow existing zoning, as it was in Dutchess County, as it is now, this is what it'll look like in 25 or 30 years. You'll have just more sprawl throughout. You'll have less farmland as it recedes further and further north. And every major road will be commercially lined so that you will have no free-flowing traffic. So we're proposing an alternative to that, a Hudson Valley Greenway. And that is embodied in this map, which we call our Centers and Green Spaces map. And what it does is it boils down using the basic principles of ecology and applying that to the human habitat as well as the natural habitat. And boiling it down to 4 basic categories, what we call indispensable items or the essentials. One is building community centers. You know, for thousands of years, we've built cities and villages and hamlets built around walkable or the distance you can haul on a cart, or in the early days in a carriage or on a horse. Only in the last 20 to 30 years, or 40 years maybe, we've violated that pattern with the use of automobiles and just spread out at unbelievable pace. So we think we should try to reestablish that centered pattern in which most development happens within a half-mile walking distance of an existing or emerging center. That allows for flexibility for new centers to develop, but it also reinforces the ones we have rather than deserting our main streets in order to create these suburban strips. And ideally, each center should be compact, complete, and connected with a sidewalk system, transit services, and a full range of things that you can walk or bike or take a short car ride to rather than a long car ride to. We've identified something in order of 70-some centers in Dutchess County, which we should try to focus our development patterns around. And then on the opposite side of the equation, we've identified the green spaces. And we worked with the Millbrook Center for, what is it called? Drawing a blank. Carrie, thank you. We tried to boil down how you define an ecologically viable, what we call biodiversity block. And the guidelines that they gave us for a sort of minimum area for area-sensitive species is 1,000 contiguous acres undivided by a road by, over 25 vehicles per hour. And so what we did is we mapped all those out. Bob Wills on our GIS system mapped out all those 1,000-acre tracts, and we combined them with existing farmland and parks and conserved lands and came up with this sort of countywide green spaces map. And if I have time. I will show you an example of how it works on the local level. We work with the town of Red Hook, the village of Red Hook, and the village of Tivoli. They formed an intermunicipal task force. They came up with a solution for their community that reinforced the villages, saved the farmland, which they identified as their prime open space that they wanted to save, and retrofitted the strip development that was already in existence south of the hamlet. This is the hamlet area, the village area, South Broadway Strip, south of the village. We divided that into two centers, a major center and a sub-center. We showed how development could happen within that, and they could satisfy almost all their housing needs and their commercial needs within walking distance of their village center. And so you have infill development in the historic center, mixed-use expansion within the village at the village edge, saving 70% of this farmland for permanent protection, and then retrofitting of the strip south of the village into something that feels and looks like a village center and integrates itself with the village. And we're happy to say they not only adopted the zoning, won a Planning Federation award for it, but also there's a developer now interested in one of the prime parcels identified for development, and if it goes through, as everybody expects it to, it'll contribute something in the neighborhood of $700,000 towards the Purchase Development Rights Fund for the agricultural lands in the outlying agricultural business districts. So you have a reciprocal relationship through incentive zoning for development in the core to finance protection in the farmland out at the outside edge. And we did the same exercise in Beacon to show that centers and green spaces not only works in rural communities, it can work in urban centers as well. Centers and green spaces map where they identified there's green spaces to be saved and the areas to be developed in brown. They've identified that area between the train station and Main Street as an area where they'd like to see infill development. They put together an illustrative plan for that area to show developers how it might look, where buildings might go, how it might be connected, what the streets might look like. They adopted a form-based code to institute that into their zoning code. And they even did architectural guidelines as part of that. So, and they're starting to see developer interest. That was just done earlier this year. So we can see how the centers and green spaces concept can work in rural areas, urban areas, and everywhere in between. So I'm hoping that you'll bless us and approve these guidelines. We can then distribute them to local communities, beef up the Greenway connections, and integrate the sort of centers and green spaces concept into new zoning there going forward. Thank you.
John, it might be a question or two, and I have a question. Are you going to, you put together a wonderful book when we were young together.
Yes.
Are you going to do that again with the new guidelines as part of it?
This was designed so that it could be inserted. It was always designed as a living document that could be expanded, and since almost nobody uses the written version anymore, it's all online. It will be incorporated. We're going to have a website that will support the centers and green spaces concepts in particular, so that it'll be interactive. You'll be able to go in there and look at your community and do a bunch of drill downs in order to get the best GIS mapping and all the sort of illustrative plans that are available for your community.
Well, that's really okay. Any questions? Yes.
First of all, does Dutchess County Legislature have to adopt this? And if they do, does the county DPW then follow the road instructions?
They don't have to. They will, I'm sure. Mark Molinaro will make sure of that, I think. Normally what we did on the first round was to wait until at least half of the municipalities adopted before the county adopted it, so that it builds from the bottom up rather than from the top down. I'm not sure how it'll be handled this time. Remember, these are guidelines. Nobody has to do it. I'm sure DPW will. They were consulted as part of the design guidelines for streets and rural roads. They had their comments, and they can live with these. Whether they actually implement them, again, this is guidelines, it's not requirements. So the only way that it could be reinforceable is if they adopt it as requirements, which nobody's contemplating at this point, but we can talk about that. Fran.
First of all, I congratulate you. This is a fantastic presentation, really great leap forward. Greenway an opportunity, if you'd like to think about developing some insert sheets relating to conservation of the Hudson River estuary and design best practices that conserve the estuary that might be incorporated into the Greenway Connections
All right, we're always
document.
looking for good ideas and helpful staff.
That's estuary junk well, of course.
Of course.
Yes.
I live in Columbia County on a country road that was just widened last week with paved shoulders. So I was just wondering, I don't know if you are clearly Dutchess County, but if anyone else knows, is any of this coming to Columbia County or Greene County? Because it's desperately needed up there.
Well, this is available online. We get requests from all over the country for, connections and links to the Greenway guides. It's available for anybody to use. We let them distribute as long as there's no guarantee without, like I said, everything in the Greenway builds from the bottom up. You've got to convince your local community leaders to adopt or at least take a look at the available information.
How much was the Department of Transportation involved in the development of these concepts, and how signed are they?
I can't speak for the Department of Transportation.
Were they involved in the development?
They were not. We distribute things around and show them. We distributed them to them. We never got any formal comments from the Department of Transportation, in my recollection.
Your recollection's better than anybody else's on this subject. So that, we'll wait anxiously for the next exciting installment.
All right.
You're very good. And
Thank you so much for that. It's so inspiring, and I think it gives just such great weight to what we're going to talk about next, which is strategic planning, which has been something that has been on the docket for years, but finally is coming to fruition. We just had a wonderful initial session with our chosen leader, Peter Fairweather, who was the unanimous choice of the committee that looked at this, at who would lead the consulting arrangement. Peter, many of you know him, has had a long history in consulting in this area, in the Hudson Valley, as head of Fairweather Consulting, I think a good 15 years now, but also a long history of teaching with SUNY New Paltz, and just many publications to his name. The resume goes on and on. He was a clear choice in this initiative that we're about to embark on. It just, it really, when we had this meeting, it just became so clear that everyone involved, just even the group of 15 of us or so, each had such clear ideas of what we hoped for the Greenway, and many of them were similar, but many went in very many directions, and it was clear that we absolutely need a strategic plan to help us coalesce limited resources and increasingly limited resources to do the very best we can going in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's a perfect time, perfect person, and Peter's going to share with us some of his findings.
Thank you, Sarah. Let me see. I should do that. This is a lefty. This must be it. Oh, I recognize it. Good. Oops. I almost got there. I can do that. There we go. All right, so what I'm going to do is just talk a bit about what the strategic planning process will involve, give you a sense of what it is, and some of the issues that we're going to be talking about. And, this is an interesting process, a strategic plan for the Communities Council, the Conservancy, and the National Heritage Area. Those of you that are on the board are familiar with this kind of agglomeration. But it really presents some very interesting opportunities and issues as we go forward. I'll just talk a bit about the scope and schedule, The approach that we'll take, I'm one of the advisors on the project working with me is Pete Matthew, has some interesting tools about strategic planning, and then just a little bit about next steps, and then any discussion that you might have. But the idea really today is just give you an overview of what this process will involve and what the issues were that we're going to be discussing. We're looking at basically a 4 to 6 month process. Involved first the first step is project initiation. If that isn't consultantese, I don't know what is. But we had a great meeting, as Sarah said, on the 25th, a group of about 15 of us, the Strategic Planning Committee, to talk about what this planning process might involve, what the obstacles and opportunities are, and what the outcomes would be. Then to look at the Greenway's current partnerships in the region and beyond, engagement with the board, staff and key stakeholders, then to do the traditional analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, the recommendation for mission-driven partnerships and programs, development of a strategy and business plan, and then the board approval. And in that process, you can see about month 3 or 4 in the process, there'll be a retreat with the board to talk about where we are in the process and get your thoughts and ideas as well. So that's the general scope and how we're going about this. To give you a sense of what strategic planning is and what it can involve, there's a helpful model that I use that was put together by my colleague Pete Matthew and Associates. And the idea is you start out doing, and this model goes from left to right, you find yourself in some kind of competitive environment, and you've got to think about, all right, what are we doing, sort of what business are we in and why are we good at it are kind of the 2 key questions. And then come up with the essence of what this organization is about, the core idea, which is expressed as the unique and inherent truth about a product, service, or organization, which differentiates it from the competition in ways that are meaningful and persuasive to the target audience. There's the official definition. And this is the part of the process that we're going to be going into over the next few months. The best way I can describe it is this is the part that really makes your head hurt, because you have to think hard about who it is, what do we do, and why do we matter to the people we serve, and how are we different from other people that are doing kind of similar things. And that's the process we're going to be going through with the Greenway and its constituent organizations, to think about what is the unique role that this organization plays, unique role or roles, in this region. How does it do it? What are its strengths? And then how can we build upon that to make this a more effective organization and to build the resources for it so it can be more sustainable and to continue to do the good work in the future. One of the ways we look at that is, that there are a whole series of questions that are involved in this and coming up with the core idea. Who are the people that we are serving? What are we serving? What is it that the Greenway does? And which, in our first meeting, that was really an interesting discussion, because this is an organization that began by really asking people to aspire, to set their sights high about what the Hudson Valley could be and what the role this organization could play in reaching those goals. And over time, sort of the what that the organization does has evolved. And, this is an ample opportunity to sort of step back and say, all right, there are all these things that we've done and that we do. Given the resource limitations that we're facing, which ones should come to the fore, which ones might play a lesser role? Then the question of, where do we do the work? When? Why? What are the benefits that people are going to get out of this process? Why are we doing it? Why does it matter? How? What are the techniques we use? And then, the one that's sometimes not thought of a lot in government and not-for-profit settings is against who are we serving? What are the other organizations out there that are doing similar things that we need to think about how the Greenway is positioned with respect to them, so that there is no duplication, and so there's a clear case of support for what the Greenway is and what it does. And it's clearly not a duplication of other existing services. And as part of this, in the discussion we had on the 25th, we started to look at the evolution of the mission and so on. And I'll just give you some examples of historically what the Greenway was about in its initial legislation, a cooperative program to continue to advance the state's commitment to the preservation, enhancement, and development of the resources of the valley. You know, that if you look at this, there's a lot here. There's a lot required and expected of this organization at its founding. And the different components add to that. The Communities Council, a voluntary regional planning compact. And, you know, we've seen some of the work that's come out of that. You know, John's amazing work in Dutchess County and the communities that are doing that work. Part of the impetus for that, part of the design for it, if you will, has come out of the Greenway process. And how do we build upon that? How do we strengthen that capacity? What role does it take in the 21st century under the new conditions now that are different from 20 years ago when this organization came forward? The Conservancy, building cooperative undertakings to open new paths to the river, to give a physical expression to the Greenway, and to think about, all right, how does the work of the Conservancy and the work of the Communities Council move forward together, and on top of that, the National Heritage Area. And what's the role and the importance of having a national designation to this interesting and unique model for regional planning cooperation and preservation. So these are the issues that we're going to be looking at. This is really, and this is not a bad thing. This makes my head hurt. This is a good thing. It's a challenge because this is a very complex organization and, you know, reflects the work and contributions of a whole region, a whole community. And you know, what we've got to come up with now as a group is what's the model going forward, and what are the things that we need to emphasize, what are the things that maybe can be de-emphasized, and how do we continue to distinguish the Greenway and make it an even more important resource as time goes on. As Mark Molinaro pointed out, we've got a breather right now to think about how do we keep moving forward so we as a community can shape development so it works well for us. One of the entities that can play a major role in that is the Greenway. And so this strategic plan will be looking at that question. You know, we've started an interview process. We've got a pretty good list of folks we've started to talk to. I think we've got about 9 of them completed already. Many of you have already gotten phone calls from us, and you know, some of you we're playing phone tag with. You know, we'll be moving forward and getting perceptions about what are the benefits, what are the things the Greenway needs to do, what are the things the Greenway maybe should not do, and what are the priorities moving forward. You know, and some of the, to give you a sense of some of the ways we're thinking about this, here's an example of a session that we, little exercise we did in the first session. You know, if the Greenway meets your highest hopes, what will it be contributing to the region in the areas of recreation, economics, quality of life, other aspects? And it's probably worth, you know, just, if you want to just take a few minutes to think about that yourselves. You know, if you think about the Greenway, something which at this point now we all kind of take advantage, it's part of our landscape. If it meets your highest expectations and hopes, what will it look like? And what will it be contributing in these areas? And again, the strategic planning process is going to take a look at that afresh and build upon existing successes, address existing opportunities and future opportunities as well. So, you know, that's the process here, is to through this process, this isn't just one person doing this, it's a collective effort, like the Greenway itself, to think about what do we need to do, how do we successfully and effectively fulfill our responsibilities. So that's really what I'm here to report on is the process we're undertaking. I guess if there are any questions, be happy to field any questions.
Give your timeline again, Peter.
Yeah, we're looking to go through the process in about the next 6 months.
I'm actually curious, when you say, you know, that everyone should think about this, is there a forum? I mean, you know, as I think of so many people here, you had a list of a few, but so many people could have invaluable input into this process. Is there a mechanism for that?
Well, I think we're considering the idea of doing public outreach meetings, and I think that's, you know, absolutely certain. We can also set up a link it might be through the website. We could even set up a little web page to get your thoughts and ideas, because I think that's absolutely essential, especially many of the folks in this room have had long involvement with the Greenway and probably with issues related to growth, development, and preservation of the valley before the Greenway. To be able to sort of pick your brains and get your thoughts, I think would really strengthen the process.
Unengaged leaders, because those look like mostly the engaged leaders. Just to get a sense of where do we meet them?
Yeah, I think there is an intent to do that. This first round, though, is we're deliberately reaching out to people that have worked with the organization, because the conversation is about, all right, what are the things that the Greenway does well? What are the things that maybe they haven't done so well in the past? And, you know, what's your overall perception about the highest and best use of this resource? But I think that's there is an opportunity here also to engage the unengaged and say, all right, what would it take to get you interested and involved?
Will you get Stanford to join?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Do I get a commission for that? All right. Any other questions or comments?
And just for the board's information, we're looking at the late winter, early spring for the retreat. We want to avoid the holiday season and the bad weather so that we can be unencumbered by those factors and get together and have an intense day-long retreat to talk about this.
And we look forward to it.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Great. Well, we now turn to the business portion of the meetings, and I will just start with an agenda review and any comments from the board on the agenda. All right. Without then further ado, that we hopefully everyone had a chance to review the minutes of the June meeting, and so this is our moment to approve those. So I will call for a motion to approve the combined meeting of the Council and the Conservancy. Stefan and Cindy, sorry, and then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. And as we always do, and this is also the minutes of the Grant Committee. Did I include those two?
We might as well do a separate one for the
Okay,
Grants.
so we also had a Grants Committee minutes, and those need to be approved, so I'll ask for a motion. Kevin and Bob. And then again, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried as well. And then as we do, we trade off, and we will start now with the council.
Thank you, Sarah. And now the council meeting is called to order, and the first order of business is a resolution. Many, and perhaps most of you remember, certainly on the council, Mary Crabb, wonderful person, who became the mayor of Newburgh, that troubled but fascinating city, on the day after her husband, who had been elected as mayor, died. And so she fulfilled a full term, actually two terms. And she was a loyal member of the Greenway. And there's a resolution in your book here. And I will skip the whereas, yes, and say, now therefore, be it resolved that the joint boards of the Greenway and the Greenway Conservancy hereby recognize the contributions of Mary Crabb and note that her elegant presence and cheerful mien will be greatly missed by all, and do send our condolences to her family. May I have a second on that? Bob? Fran? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Okay. And we'll send this. Mark, is anyone from her family that we...
Not
No,
today, but
children.
we will ensure that they get the
Okay,
resolution.
all right. Now, onward and upward with the arts, and here we go for Mark, will you handle the Greenway lead agency status matter, please? And explain what it is.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for coming today. We like to have our meetings about an hour and a half away from everything, so we're glad to see the turnout today. Before I go into the seeker business, John Clark touched on this building being an example of green infrastructure. I wanted to ask Linda Cooper, who is the Regional Director of State Parks in this region and headquartered in this building, not only to thank her for welcoming us here and hosting us today, but also to say a few words about what makes this building so special.
Money, for one thing, right?
Money.
Money.
Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you, Linda.
So welcome to the Taconic Regional Office of State Parks, Recreation and Historic Preservation. I know many of you, I'm pleased to meet the others, wanted you to know that this is the first, it was as the first of New York State's public buildings to get the LEED Platinum certified. It's LEED Platinum certified, which is with the U.S. Green Building Council, and we're pleased to host today's Greenway Council meeting. This building ranks in the top of the 1% to 2% of the most energy efficient buildings in the mid-Atlantic states. It uses 30% less water than a typical office building. It has 100% geothermal heating and cooling, solar voltaic electric, an injection of 30% fresh air into the building at all times using heat exchangers. Our flooring tiles right here that you can see were made from a corn-based product. I think it's the husk, I've been told, rather than standard petroleum-based vinyl. We used low VOC paint. They're both occupancy and daylight sensors regulating the lighting. Regional materials were used when possible, and the construction debris was recycled rather than being dumped. The parking area is made from permeable materials, and it was designed to avoid heat island effect and take into consideration dark sky lighting and low maintenance landscaping. The plantings are native and indigenous to this area. We daylighted 550 feet of a stream at the rear of the property and created ponds to treat the stormwater, following the green infrastructure guidelines that John Clark mentioned in his earlier presentation. In other words, every part of this building took the environment into consideration and sought to reduce impact. And we do sort of wax poetic about the building. It was first constructed in 1930 as a school building. It was purchased by State Parks in the late 1990s, and it's been our regional office since December 2010. The retrofit was about $7.5 million, and we are, as Mr. McHenry said, ever so grateful to Dr. Lucy Roletsky, who is the State Parks Council Chair, and she made this project possible by donating about half of the funds for the regional office and to whom this building is dedicated. And in fact, she donated the funds for the construction, and then when she saw the state was going to move its old furniture into the building, she donated funds to furnish it as well. So, saying, you're not putting that stuff in here. The old office used to be in the basement of the Mills Mansion, which is also on this campus. So I do welcome you, enjoy the day and the meeting here, and I encourage you to take advantage and visit the many parks and historic sites that we have in the region, as well as our administrative offices. There are a number of brochures about them in the hallway. Right here, you're in Mills Norris State Park. We have Hudson River Waterfront. There's a marina that was recently part of a New York Works project. It was dredged and redone with new floating dock structures and infrastructure. There's an environmental research center, the Hudson River Estuary Program. There's the beautiful river. There are woodland trails, some of which have been recently revamped. There's camping. We have a resplendent historic site in Staatsburg State Historic Site, a wonderful golf course, all right here in Staatsburg. And we're happy to offer a tour of this facility if anybody wants to see the geothermal or the solar after the meeting. And I encourage you to take some time and to drive around, if you have a chance, just a few minutes, just to drive around this campus and get a sense of how beautiful it is, and then come back again to enjoy it with your family and friends. So thank you for the great work that the Greenway Council and the Conservancy do, and we at State Parks are glad to be a partner in your work.
lead agency.
All right, now back to the business. Thank you, Linda, again. And the first order of business for the Greenway Council is actually the adoption of a resolution to declare ourselves lead agency, to adopt the negative declaration for the environmental review of the 7 new Greenway guides that John presented previously, and approve those guides. An advantage of being relocated to the DEC building in Albany is that we're a stone's throw away from the seeker department, which includes 1 person right now. But I did ask him whether we can, at one meeting, through one resolution, declare ourselves lead agency, approve a negative declaration, and authorize a document. And he said we could, so that's what the resolution in front of you does.
So that's a resolution, agenda item 5D on 2 pages, and what we call for is a proposer and seconder, and as always, Mr. Elliott, thank you, sir, and Steve, and then, so therefore, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. And now, John Clark, we did that right, say, for you, really. And and now we move on to, we have a bunch of resolutions. And Mark, let me see, the next thing I wanted to do was to do what you told me on here. Well, by the way, when you're talking about furniture, is that for those of you who go on the other side of the river from time to time and go to Bear Mountain and the Bear Mountain Inn, which is just fully reopened, is the furniture there was all made by prisoners of New York State. And in fact, that tradition still continues. Corecraft is a prison factory. New York is a leader in many ways, and one of the things to do is to give people in jail something to do, and that's worked out, and it's not all bad. Well, I mean, some of the furniture is really pretty good.
Yeah, yes.
Agree on that. Okay, but now is that the Greenway community, the village of Mamaroneck. Mark, do you want to say, is there somebody here?
We have a map over here to my left that shows the participation in the Greenway. While we are almost at 100%, we still have communities that are coming on board and adopting the Greenway principles. The village of Mamaroneck in Westchester County is our newest Greenway community in Westchester County. It's good to see progress in Westchester, and it's also good to point out firsts. The resolution that the board just adopted to update the Dutchess County Compact is the first ever update to a Greenway Compact in the history of the Greenway program. So congratulations, John, for continuing to get the message out there and forcing communities to drink the Kool-Aid voluntarily to advance and support the program. But we're happy to welcome the village of Mamaroneck. Is there anybody here from the village to say a few words? No? Good.
It's a nice place. You say that, okay? And
it's okay.
They get it right, and then I think, do we have a resolution on that, Mark? I think we do.
Yes, we have a resolution. We can do one macro.
Okay, why don't we do that? We bore everybody to death on these resolutions. Yes. So let's pick that up with the Greenway community.
Yes.
Okay. But before we do that, I'd like to welcome Andy Jamar, who at long last has officially joined the Greenway. He's really been part of it. He's a 2004. In 2004, he became the executive director of the Hudson Highlands Land Trust, and has done marvelous work. That's on the other side of the Bear Mountain, this side of the Bear Mountain Bridge, and you have done a great deal to help that. And it's not exactly a troubled community. He was, of course, a West Point grad, colonel, I believe we would call him, and in 1977, with 3 terms at West Point, right? And do you want to say anything about what you're doing over there and the good work that you're doing in Putnam County?
Well, Putnam County continues to evolve in terms of its relationship to the Greenway. We hope to get all the towns in the next year to join the Greenway. The county did so several years ago. We have 1 town, and we've got 5 more to go. But thank you very much, Barney.
Well, Andy, we're delighted to have you join us, and the thing is that he is a committee member, he's grants committee member, so that, and grants are an important part of what we do.
They are.
So you're an important person and an important part. Okay. Now, Mark?
It's an important lesson to other board members, too. If you hang around long enough, we're going to ask you to do more work. So I thank Andy for agreeing to serve on the Grants Committee.
Don't tell any secrets. Now go on right to the town of Ankrum.
Town of Ankrum. Betsy Jacks, who is a resident of Columbia County, understands the struggles that Columbia County communities face in terms of planning. But we received an application from the town of Ankrum to do a natural resource conservation plan. They are working with one of our strong partners in the area, the Columbia Land Conservancy, to do that plan. The Grants Committee is recommending to the board funding that planning process at $7,500. Any questions from the board about the project?
This has all been approved by the Grants Committee.
Anyone from Ankrum here? Lucy?
Yes, I'm an Ankrum resident, and I'm thrilled that you're doing this grant now.
Thank you, Lucy. We have a couple, wow. Small town in Columbia County. There's like a couple people here from that's great. The next one is to our neighbor from the north, the town of Sand Lake in Rensselaer County. They're creating more public access to Glass Lake. That public access will not only provide access where there was not quality access before, but it will also be ADA accessible. Is anyone here from Sand Lake? And if not, Linda, do you want to say anything about the project?
Well, this is actually, there's used to be a lot of lake access in Rensselaer County, especially in the town of Sand Lake. Most of it's been eaten up by privatization, so this is actually allowing more public access back into the lake systems in Sand Lake.
Great. That's a good project. The Grants Committee is recommending $7,500 in funding for that access project. Now, the next one is the Village of Brewster in Putnam County. The Greenway awarded the village a grant for a Main Street study in partnership with Pattern for Progress a couple board meetings ago. They've completed that project, and now we're following up on that work with a more comprehensive look at the village through a comprehensive plan. You'll note on the resolution that are in your packets that the actual project references the previous project that I just mentioned, Sand Lake. We have corrected that in the official one that's going to be signed and will be the record of this meeting. But I just wanted to point that out. But we're pleased to support planning in any way we can, and Andy knows the value and importance of this in Putnam County. We are confident that the village will complete a quality project, and the Grants Committee is recommending $7,500 for this comprehensive planning process.
All right, let's go right on to the Greenway Compact Grant.
The City of Poughkeepsie. This is a really innovative project. The city is partnering with Pattern for Progress, and we have Jonathan Drapkin and March Gallagher here today with Pattern. I'd mentioned their project with Brewster. I think this builds on their participation and involvement with local governments. The city of Poughkeepsie is situated and is surrounded by schools, colleges, and universities, places of higher education. And those institutions graduate high-quality individuals. And the crux of this study is going to examine how to work with those institutions to get those kids to stay here and plant roots in the city of Poughkeepsie and surrounding communities. So Jonathan or March or anybody else want to say a few words about the project?
Sure, March Gallagher on behalf of Pattern. I want to point out a beautiful call to action of the city of Poughkeepsie as well. Thank you for inviting us today. I just want to note that this project really builds on a lot of the things in Greenway Connection, and we just wanted to draw your attention to that. In particular, the development in the densely populated area, making use of transit-oriented development and existing infrastructure. And we're spending a lot of time thinking about the millennial generation, how to retain them here. We have 5 colleges surrounding Poughkeepsie. Why is Poughkeepsie not the coolest place on earth? It's a metro north ride to the city, and it's got all this great infrastructure. So we want to use the Hudson Valley as an asset to build on that and retain millennials here. We feel that it fits right in with the compact adopted by the local city.
Great. And I think we do too, and the Grants Committee is recommending a modest $7,500 for that study. So that's the full slate of grants that are in front of the board today.
Well, actually, in fact, 7,500 is what they asked for.
Yes.
So, but anyway, in any event, now we would have 4 resolutions as one, and we need to have a motion. Second.
Any
Thank you, Andy.
recusals?
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and we don't need a resolution, Mark, for the what's that other thing we had in there? It was a redo.
A rescope? No.
No.
No, we
Okay.
don't.
So that completes the work of the council. Unless you have any questions, comments.
Yes.
I just wanted to, this is Laura from the Mastery Program. I wanted to make a comment about Anchor. I'm so pleased to hear about that grant. And I think it's a reminder of the importance of all of our different partners working with municipalities for a long period of engagement. The volunteers from the CDC and the Planning Board in Anchor worked on a mapping of habitats in natural areas starting back in 2001 with Hudson through an entry program funded partnership. And that group has continued that effort all these years, and I think they almost now have a complete map of the entire town of all their important habitats and natural areas. So that's the kind of baseline information that can be used to plan like this. So I'm so glad that you funded it, so that they can now take it to the next step. So hopefully we can continue working together, the estuary program in Greenway, on working with the town.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Sarah?
Yeah. All right, so we'll now move on to the work of the Conservancy, and I will call the Conservancy to order. And we have a few items on the agenda, starting with the audit, the Conservancy audit. Mark, would you like to talk about?
I will say a few words about the audit. And once again this year we got through our audit process with flying colors. The final reports are not available yet, but since it's on the agenda, and I'm taking my privilege to defer to Scott Keller to say a few words about the preliminary findings of the audit.
Preliminary findings are that it's a clean audit. We haven't seen a management letter or a draft. I don't know that there were any issues. They didn't speak to me of any, so I don't anticipate any, certainly nothing major.
Well, it's another clean audit, and that's in testament to Scott Keller's work. He manages a lot of money coming in and going out of the Greenway, including grants, both grants that we receive and manage, payroll, pretty much any expenditure he takes care of. And this is, I don't know how many years in a row that we can expect another clean audit. 5 years in a row, perhaps?
Something like that.
It's nothing to be right home about.
Stay up here, because we have a little more to go. Okay. That's great, Scott. Just it's so important to know that an organization is running smoothly, efficiently.
The board put good procedures in place a long time ago. And just follow the procedures.
Well, very modest. All right. So now we have 3 areas that we're going to. These are the Conservancy grants, a Greenway Trail designation, and a Greenway Water Trail designation. We're going to all of them need approval by the board, but we're going to lump them all together for an approval for all of them at the end. But I think it would be great, Mark. There's some wonderful grants that we've had the chance to approve, and it would be great to have you talk about them, Mark.
Great, my pleasure. The Greenway Conservancy has been able to run the Greenway Conservancy Small Grants Program for something like 18 years. And this year we were able to offer a $50,000 grant program. It's not money that's going to be necessarily transformative, but hopefully it's going to set the stage for bigger and better projects, and that's really how the Greenway can be most effective with its small grant funding. The Greenway Conservancy grants really focus on trail development, interpretation, and doing studies that help us and help the region think about building connections between our regional trail networks. And we're pleased to be able to offer funding and fund 9 projects this year through this $50,000 program. And the first one is a grant to the Winnicke Land Trust for the Town of Red Hook Outreach and Multiple Greenway Trail Connection Project. And Lucy Hayden, would you like to say a few words about the project on behalf of Winnicke?
Sure, thank you, Mark. Everyone knows planning in Red Hook is really stellar, and they have a wonderful trails committee, volunteers, and they've asked Winnicke Land Trust to assist with, in particular, working with private landowners to negotiate trail easements. They're focused right now on connections that would give safe routes to schools, connecting residential areas with parks, Greenway Park College, some more access into the village of Tivoli and Red Hook, and we're very happy to have your support in that. And I do want to mention, too, that this year, for the first time, Winnicke Land Trust tour of historic barns and working farms within the Ramble, and it was terrific for us. It was a great experience and gave us a nice bump of attendance from all over the region, so thanks for that.
Well, that's great feedback. Thank you. Yes, Jennifer.
I have to abstain from one, and it's the Kingston Land Trust, which allows me to thank the Greenway Conservancy for the trail signage grant. We've been making enormous progress in Kingston ever since we met with you several years ago down on the waterfront. We've just been going gangbusters developing the Kingston Green Line, which is where the hub where all the railroads in Ulster County meet. And we have been developing what are going to become truly a completely interconnected hub of rail trails in Kingston, branching out to the entire county. So thank you for your ongoing support.
That's great. Thank you, Jennifer. In terms of housekeeping, and this reminds me, thank you, there are going to be a number of recusals as we go through the Conservancy application. So at the end, before we take the vote, just mention the application that you're recusing yourself from, and we'll make a note in the records for it. The next one is the New Baltimore Conservancy for an interpretive sign project at the new Riverside Park that's been developed. Scenic Hudson came in, as they do, and purchased property along the Hudson River in the town of New Baltimore, the historic Anderson Farm. They're working with the town of the New Baltimore Conservancy, who is actively raising money to acquire the property from Scenic Hudson. This $1,759 grant project will fund the construction and installation of interpretive signs, the first interpretation that's going to happen on this spectacular property in New Baltimore. Steve, do you have anything to say about the project?
I encourage everyone who doesn't spend a lot of time in New Baltimore to go up and check out this amazing stretch of riverfront. And I just want to commend the local community and the Conservancy for taking such a strong ownership and leadership role in conceiving a beautiful public use plan for the project, taking care of the emergencies, and at the same time sort of looking forward to a beautiful park there. So, yes.
But Steve, you Cindy Hudson, have created how many riverside parks? It must be 20 by now at least, right?
Dozens.
Dozens, okay. You really led the way, and in many cases this was land that had been discarded by the communities because it was either troubled for any number of reasons, and it's marvelous what you've done on both sides of the river, all the way up and down.
Thank you, Barney. This particular property was a former farm with a lot of the community's own agricultural heritage represented there, so it means a lot to the people in New Baltimore and provides incredible access directly to the river, so it's a great opportunity.
And additional context for this grant and that parcel is that it sets the stage for the development of Greenway trails on the parcel and a new public access water trail site on the parcel as well. So it's a relatively modest investment, I think, that will accrue into future benefits for the Greenway program. And in the interest of full disclosure, the property is across the street from my in-laws' house, but that played no part in the grant award. The next one is the Wyndham Area Recreation Foundation to construct the Wyndham Multi-Use Path. The route goes from 296 over the Batavia Kill up in the Catskill Mountains. Most of the trails in the Catskills are in the Catskill Forest Preserve. This one is sort of in the valley areas. It's a really well-done path that sort of connects the hamlet of Wyndham into the other trail systems. This will be a capital project, which is one of the highest priorities for this grant program. $10,000, according to their application, is really going to go a long way for them to construct new trail mileage and really build on their existing asset. The town of Wyndham, you don't necessarily think in the Greenway area because it's way up in the Catskills, but we are pleased to support any group that's doing trail development, regardless of how close they are to the Hudson River. And we're recommending $10,000 for that grant project.
Mark.
Yes. Yes, yes, sir.
Charlie West from Greenway Region.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Here, Nick Bode, President. We're really excited to bring the Greenway into what we're doing up in Wyndham, building the Wyndham path, and we think it's a worthy project, and we really appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Nick. Charlie, would you like to say anything? Nick, I'm sorry. You're Charlie.
Just we're excited to work with the Greenway, and we are tucked away up in Wyndham. We opened the first phase of the Wyndham path Memorial Day weekend this year, and it's been tremendously popular. So if any of you get a chance to wander up there in the hills, check it out. It's right on Route 23 coming into town, and we're excited to work with the Greenway and add that second phase. We have ambitious plans to do 8 phases.
Wow, that's tremendous. We'll be here to support you. So thank you. Thank you for coming. Great project. The next one is the town of Highlands. This is Scenic Hudson Mine Dock Park. This is a grant that proposes $8,700. And I know Scott Keller really worked for a while to sort of set this project up. And can you explain some of the significance of this particular grant proposal?
Sure. When 9/11 happened, the public launch at West Point was closed. And since then, we've had a gap between Cornwall and Stony Point of about 20 miles. This site sits close to in the middle of it, just north of the Fort Montgomery site. So it gives us a launch there, which lets us fill one of the critical gaps that we have. One of the goals of the water trail is to have launches every 10 miles or less on both shores of the river. They have, as you'll see later, we're going to designate this site as part of the water trail. They've requested that designation. This grant will provide improvements to their launch. It will take out some old deteriorated steel mesh that lays on top of the concrete launch. It will take up the concrete and it will put gravel in, which is a friendlier surface to kayaks. The launch itself sits in a cove that doesn't get a lot of current, so we don't anticipate scouring, just looking at all the other things that are there. Fort Montgomery actually is going to provide their kayak racks to this site, so we don't have to have that as part of the grant, but they are looking for, also going to put a kiosk in so they can direct people who come in and park their kayak on the rack to go up into town and spend a little money.
That's great. Yes.
Yes, I'm Jean Work.
Oh,
from
Jean.
Town of Highlands,
Yes, thank you for coming.
And I'd like to thank you for considering this project. Our town does not have any riverfront access. This site has been, in my view, and I think in the view of Scenic Hudson and many others, for over 30 years, it's been a derelict and unused marina. Very interesting but difficult gentleman to work with, owned it, and he died still owning it. I think it was the happiest day of his family's life to know that he died on the property that he loved so much, because I am biased, but I think this is one of the most beautiful places in the Hudson Valley and even in the world. The view is just gorgeous of the Hudson Highlands, the Bear Mountain Bridge, and much protected land. And I thank Scenic Hudson for purchasing the property, and for Scott Keller and those in the Greenway for encouraging us to form a group. It's amazing that I've lived in this town for 33 years, and I know a lot of people who are in not-for-profit. They all tend to be about my age. When we started this project and asked for volunteers, suddenly people I'd never known before, young people, came with tremendous muscles and willpower and to help get it cleaned up. So I'm looking forward to the project.
Great, and thank you for your work on that, Jean. Tremendous. The next one is the Palisades Park Conservancy, Tallman Mountain State Park Biodiversity Trail. This grant will fund interpretive signs. We're recommending funding this project at the $3,000 level. Matt Shook from Pipsy is here. Would you like to say a few words about the project?
Thank you for the funding for the trail.
Great. We're happy to fund it. Thank you for coming, Matt. The next one is the Town of Esopus for the Esopus Explorers Project. This is a $775 grant. The project will help knit together and promote trail use in the town of Esopus. And here to say a few words about the project from the town are Diane Dindroff and Marion Zimmer.
When I first came to Esopus about 30 years ago, I was one of the lucky ones who got a house right above the George Spear Beach, and I'm grateful every day when I come out to the river. Another thing that I'm very grateful for is my neighbors to the south of me, the Zimmers, Marion and Fred Zimmer. Marion introduced me to so many very unique aspects in the town of Esopus. You know, we have the natural beauty of the scenic Hudson Park, the historic and cultural aspects of John Burroughs Sanctuary, the artistic work now that's done with the Tugboat Alley down 9W. We have beautifully credible sustainability projects like our town hall. The Esopus Explorer Project hopes to integrate all of those people who don't have a wonderful neighbor like Marion to drag them around to different places, so that when they come into the town, they can say, okay, if we get this Esopus Explorers chart, we can do all these different things. And it's a guide to that.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a great project. Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I just want to thank our community partners, Scenic Hudson and the John Burroughs Association, who are partnering with us. This is a volunteer initiative, and we're going to be promoting not only lands in the town of Soaps Parks, but in their parks as well. And we do thank them for supporting us and for your contribution. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much. It's a great project. The next one, as Jennifer Schwartz mentioned before, is for the Kingston Land Trust. This board funded, I think provided some of the first funding for a feasibility study to create a rail trail from Kingston Point in the Rondout to Midtown Kingston. That's going to be the start of the trail that hopefully extends up to Phoenicia, miles and miles away. They're actually working to build the trail right now using the plan that we funded. And now they're trying to promote the trail and connect it to the community through signs. So this $1,800 grant will help the Kingston Land Trust put up signs at the entrances to the trail to expose the trail to the community in Kingston. And we already heard from Jennifer about the wonderfulness of this project. The next one is the town of New Paltz, the New Paltz Flats Trail Project. The Greenway has previously funded trail feasibility studies not only in southern Ulster County, but specifically in the Mohonk Preserve. They have looked at trail connections and opportunities to connect the preserve to the village of New Paltz itself. This project will look at the area, the flats between the village and the preserve, and will look to identify routes to make that connection a reality. And here to talk a little bit about the project is Eric Knopf from Mohonk Preserve and Bill Weinstein. And we're really excited to help you complete this project.
This is a really important step in connecting the mountains, which are, of course, a great tourist destination in the very protected areas in the Hudson Valley, to the town of New Paltz, along a pretty dangerous corridor, Route 299. There have been some pretty serious accidents on there for bicyclists. So this Flats Trail, planning this Flats Trail will begin the process of making New Paltz a bike-friendly town and connecting these important two places for the bicyclists and pedestrians. And also will be giving a close link to the rail trail, which will lead to all sorts of other communities helping businesses. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Eric. It's going to be a great project and a worthy investment to create trails. As is the next one. The next one's a grant to the Open Space Institute and the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail and for the City of Kingston Connector. What this project will look at is how to connect the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail to the center of the City of Kingston. We heard about the rail trail efforts in the city right now. This will be a critical link that will connect not only the center of the City of Kingston to the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail, but it will set the stage for the connection of the future Catskill Mountain Rail Trail, the Kingston Point Rail Trail, to the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail, which will connect to the Hudson Valley Rail Trail, which will go over the walkway over the Hudson to the Dutchess County Rail Trail. So someday you'll be able to get from Phoenicia to Wappingers or to Wallkill in this tremendous rail trail network. This is a critical link that they're looking at right now to build that connection and set the stage for capital projects to make this a reality. So is anybody here from OSI or the city to talk a little bit about it? Jennifer, do you have any familiarity with this project? Well, what it's going to do is really allow those organizations to develop a plan of action to invest in making that connection. It's one of the things that I think the Greenway can be most effective in providing funding to look at these critical connections that will set the stage for future success and future regional connections. And this is an exemplar of that. We're recommending the highest dollar award for this grant, $14,400.
Oh, yes, actually, I do. Thank you.
Actually, I am a trustee of Open Space Institute, and so, of course, I wouldn't vote on this anyway because I'm not a member of the Conservancy. But all this goes back to the early days of the Greenway, and the original legislation said really nothing about trails. And it was the membership of the Greenway that said, this really is important. If we could have a trail, we could have trail linkages that would be on both sides of the Hudson, from the city of New York to the city of Albany. And you've come a long way on that, Mark, in the last, these things really have locked together. And Beth, where are you? That's what's happening. And we can be really proud of the interest and funding that is generated from others. I mean, that's what we do best, is give a little bit of money, as you know, Steve, to make big things happen. And that's what Scenic Hudson has done as well. Actually, Scenic Hudson and OSI have both worked on trails together on this. And I think in a couple more years, we can have a real celebration. This is incredible amount, and none of this existed. Well, a little bit, but really not very much when we started, right, Steve?
I don't require a lot of prompting to participate in the celebration, so I look forward to it in a couple of years. But Sarah, before we call for the vote for these grants, I want to note for any Conservancy members if there are any recusals on the grant applications. Kitty?
I'm going to have to recuse myself for the grant for the flats grant.
Okay.
But before I do that, I just want to commend Aaron Roth as conservator, because the part that he very modestly left out was that this involved significant negotiations with one of the major farms in our area, and it's just a wonderful example of the kind of cooperation that we can see between the farming community and the trails community, because this trail will enhance both. So thank you to the conservators.
Great. All right. So that was the only recusal, Sally?
Yes, the Winnicke Land Trust for the trail work that's going to be going on in Red Hook. And I know throughout the state we talk about the importance of these trail connections, and so we're very excited about having the opportunity to work in Red Hook.
Any other recusals? Okay, so then I will call for a motion to approve all of the designations and grants.
So moved.
Donald, Jane will second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Then that's the answer.
Great.
Okay.
Jane?
We hear about these proposals, and I know as a recipient of a Greenway grant for trails, I was required to give a report back to say what had happened. It'd be really nice one time if we could collect a number of the photos and have just an informal show and tell that would show people some of the things that have happened with the grant money. Okay, it will give other people here ideas of what they can do. Okay, and it also reinforces what an effect it has on the community.
I agree. It's something that we can easily put together because we do a project spotlight in our monthly newsletter. So we do have pictures and the narratives to go along with that. So it's definitely something we can do.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, so
Onward
to National Heritage Area. No?
But before we get into the heritage area, we've all been sitting down for long. Anybody like to get a 2-minute stretch here and have some more of that? Do we have any Greenway? We don't need Greenway more. No, we're ready to the heritage area, aren't we?
No, we actually do have. Yeah,
All right.
we have some Greenway Trail designations. So
Greenway Trail designations.
Okay.
All right, good.
Greenway designates trails. We have over 750 miles of designated trails in our system. This new trail at Wave Hill in the Bronx is the newest member of the Greenway Trail family. They've requested designation. Attached to your board packets are the seeker short form and resolution welcoming the trails in Wave Hill as part of the Greenway Trail system. We also have, and thanks to Scott Keller, 3 Greenway Water Trail designations, 4 Greenway Water Trail designations for this meeting. I always like to celebrate milestones, and these new designations will put us over 100 public access sites along the Hudson River Greenway Water Trail. So it's a milestone, and it's really a testament to partners working together to create better public access and to the work that Scott Keller has done to secure these nominations and access points. So Scott, do you have any words to say about the 4 designations?
Sure. Schuyler and Fort Hardy Parks in the village of Schuylerville give us 2 different types of designations. Schuyler Park has a trailer boat launch, and Fort Hardy Park is actually, Barney, where the British grounded their weapons at the end of the Battle of Saratoga, and it will serve as both
I'll tell the Colonel Johnson.
Hand launch site and as a campsite. There will be 3 campsites there. So we're excited about that. That's our most northerly campsite now. Dock Park, we've already talked about the criticality of that one. And the last one, and unfortunately the folks from that can't be here today because it's Bard Rock at Vanderbilt Mansion. That's our first National Park Service site.
Why is it called Bard Rock when Bard is 50 miles north of there?
Apparently there was more than one poet. It's almost been known as Bard Rock at that area. There's an existing ramp there. It will be a day-use access only. There's no way to drive. Security has it closed off. 5 miles south of here, right? Just about, isn't it? Just a few miles, yes, absolutely. And that will give people a place to pull in, leave their boats, and then go and explore the trails, which are already designated Greenway trails in the mansion itself.
Great. So now one resolution for the trail designation?
Sure. Okay, so we will have another resolution for the 2 the trail designations for land and water. So I will call for a motion. Jane first it. Any second? Stefan? All in favor? Aye. Any nays? And any recusals on this? Okay, then that's the motion is carried. And so now we will move on to the National Heritage Area. This is something that Barney, you and I both manage, but we will start with a training partnership, so the training partnership you'll tell us about?
Sure. One of the things that we've been successful at in the past, and through the Heritage Area program, it's one of the things we focus on, is that's getting sites to work together to tell our story in the Hudson Valley region. This project seeks to do that, engage our partner sites to tell a better story. It will involve partnering with the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, Dutchess County Tourism, the local and regional Path Through History work group in this region. Through that effort, they're committing $20,000 to this effort. The National Heritage Area has budgeted another $20,000. So between the 2, we're investing $40,000 in 2 elements. First, hospitality training to help sites not only address visitor issues at their own site, but also to be prepared to direct visitors to other sites around the region, either that are geographically related to them or related to them based on their story. A great example of how that works is the partnership between Olana and the Thomas Cole House, is that if you go to either one of those sites, you get information on the other site. And it makes sense because those are the 2 top-tier Hudson River School painters, and we hope to extend that hospitality training and ethic to other sites in the region. The other part of it focuses on telling a better story. One of our other successful projects that we worked with Dutchess County Tourism on was an experiential project. And we can see examples of that today at Vanderbilt Mansion, well, maybe when they reopen. And they have a Downton Abbey tour that focuses on showing you the experience of the servants when that mansion was in operation. Those kind of experiential programs really connect people with history and make it really more likely that people will visit the historic site. It's moving away from a narrative conversation about the significance of this candelabra, but really engaging people in who the people were and why the site's significant. So the other half of that training is going to be really doing an in-depth study at sites to help them identify what their most compelling stories are and giving them the tools they need to tell them in a more engaging way so that more people come to their sites and spend their money in our region. So more to come on that partnership project. Anybody who wants to be involved, please see me after the meeting. Right now we're framing out the specifics of it, working with state parks, and Linda Cooper has been very much involved in that project, and we look forward to hopefully doing these workshops in the spring or early summer next year. One of the great things about coming here today was that we got to award $80,000 in grants, and it's also my pleasure to announce another grant program through our National Heritage Area for Heritage Development Grants. Again, it's not a lot of money, but it's going to be a $50,000 grant program to help historic sites do better interpretation. I think one of the focuses of this grant program will be projects that seek to knit sites together thematically or geographically. We plan to announce that program within the next month or so that grant applications can be awarded and projects can begin in advance of the summer tourism season in 2014. So be on the lookout for that grant announcement. It's coming up very shortly. Yes?
A lot of the state parks have some history connected to them. Are they exempted from, you said historic sites? Would they be allowed to apply, say a friends group? Because
Yes.
there happens to be some significant history associated with a particular site. I'm thinking of some that have CCC connections. There's one in central New York. I know FDR Park in Westchester has it. And I'm sure there are others as well.
No, we welcome the state parks to apply for this grant program as well.
Yeah.
The next one is, you see photos behind me, and I see a number of partners in the crowd that host Ramble events. But this year, once again, we did our 14th annual Hudson River Valley Ramble. 14 years, the Ramble has become a brand. And this year, we had over 200 events throughout the Hudson River Valley that were organized by 160 partner organizations. The economic impact study that was commissioned last year by the National Park Service estimated that the Ramble's regional economic impact tops $21 million each year. So it's really something that I think our partners can look to, that the collective effort that all the small and large organizations contribute to telling our story, interpreting our history, connecting people to our natural places has a tremendous economic impact. It's not discretionary, but it's central. It's a central part of our economic development portfolio, and investment in these places, both large and small, is critical to that as well. Now, this year for the Ramble, and I'd like to point out Beth Campachero, who, in addition to doing all of her other work, is the lead Ramble coordinator. And just join me in thanking Beth for putting together the Ramble this year. One of the things that we did this year was expand our social media outreach. And I'm pleased to report that we doubled our social media connection and exponentially increased our social media exposure. The goal for next year is to expand into New York City markets because we believe that hipsters in Brooklyn really want to come up to the Hudson River Valley and go on hikes. So that's what our focus is going to be next year. But we continue to grow the event, and we look forward to doing it again next year. We will give you a full report in January with visitation estimates and hopefully estimated economic impact as well. Yes?
I attended 3 local Ramble events. And I was amazed, we meet in a certain area, how many people showed up. I still, to this day, trying to figure out how they all knew about it. There was actually, and locally, there is a wave of connection there that happened. And also, a number of the events received a lot of press attention. So, to me, locally, it was a tremendous success.
And that's really what the success relies upon, is that the local organizations getting the word out about their events and the enthusiasm that that generates, combined with our efforts, it's just really we're able to extend and expand our promotion of the event and connect more people to it. Part of our analysis is obviously how people find out about the Ramble. And one of the criticisms that we receive is that it's the coolest event that nobody knows about. And with, a limited marketing budget, we rely on sort of the guerrilla marketing aspect of it. But we're starting to change the way we invest our money and look critically at where we make the investments. So next year, we're going to take a hard look at whether we're doing print material again, how much we're doing, whether we should target markets in New York City, what's going to be most effective. The measurement of this year's Ramble will help inform those decisions next year. Yes, Sal?
I'd like to just pick up on that. Lucy mentioned earlier that Winnicke's Barn Tour was very successful this year, and we think a lot of it had to do with our involvement with the Ramble. What she didn't mention was that we had people that came to Northern Dutchess area for this barn tour that were from Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, and of course New York. And it wasn't because of our marketing, because we don't have that kind of outreach. So we want to give the Ramble the credit for it. That was the only way it could have happened. So in terms of the economic impact, it really spreads very, very wide.
Well, that's tremendous feedback, and it's something that we hope to do this year, and it looks like we did it. So it's really great to know, and that example is really heartening because we changed some things with that goal in mind. The next one is going to be a very short report. It's about Teaching the Hudson Valley, our place-based education program. The report is very short because I was unable to communicate with Debbie Duke, who is the coordinator of the program, as she is paid by the federal government.
That shouldn't be that hard to do because her husband's sitting right over there.
But all reports this year, the Teaching the Hudson Valley Institute, which engages teachers, addressed this year how to do the Common Core and place-based education at the same time. It's a really relevant topic for educators this year. It was once again an outstanding had a lot of participation. The mobile workshops were really well received, and we sort of created an army of teachers that are now equipped to continue to do the engaging educational programs within the framework of the Common Core. But in terms of specific numbers or reports, because Congress couldn't get their act together, I couldn't.
But one of the things it does is bring public school children to the neighboring historic sites that are listed in we have almost 100 of those, and Debbie's been extraordinarily successful in that, she now, I think it's now over 50 sites that have been visited over the years on this. And you might take that home with you and tell her we said that, Steve, and we can be very, very proud. It's about the 7th or 8th year, is it?
I think we have about 10. About 10 years for the Teaching the Hudson Valley program. And in that time, this board has provided grant awards to fund field trips to connect students with historic sites and environmental sites so that they can learn by doing and learn by touching things. And that is often the most resilient kind of learning that there is.
Those grants started with curriculum development so that there could be Hudson Valley based education in the schools that meet the standards that are required for graduation.
My Ramble event this year, I went down to the inaugural Washington Rochambeau Regatta. And Fran Dunwell was there, and a number of other our partners were there. And the regatta was put on by Janet Burnett. She is the New York chair of the Washington Rochambeau Revolutionary Route. It's a national historic trail that goes from Rhode Island down to Yorktown, Virginia, and marks the route that Washington and the Comte de Rochambeau took on the final march to victory for the American Revolution. That route goes across Westchester and Rockland counties and connects with sites in Orange County and other places. And the Greenway was awarded a $300,000 grant in 2007. We were lucky enough to be able to work with the Park Service to do the first interpretive project in the National Historic Trail with those funds. That project right now includes is going to include 15 interpretive panels along the route in Westchester and Rockland counties. And the regatta was created to celebrate and commemorate the crossing of the armies across the Hudson River. And so with our partners on the Clearwater, we had an event with the National Washington Rochambeau organization, with a representative from expatriate Frenchman, who was somebody who looked out of Central Casting. If you were going to cast a Frenchman to show up, he had the handlebar mustache and the glasses. Anyway, it was a tremendous event, and it also recognized the work of Congressman Maurice Hinchey. One of the things that's going to happen in future years is that the regatta is going to be a race, and they're going to race for the Hinchey Cup. And the Hinchey Cup was announced at the inaugural regatta back in the end of September. What was also announced were 3 Heroes of the Hudson Awards. And I was honored to accept the award, the Hero of Hudson Award, on behalf of you all, on behalf of the Hudson River Valley Greenway. And we were recognized by the National Washington Rochambeau organization for our work to help interpret and tell the story of the National Historic Trail. In addition to our recognition, Ned Sullivan from Scenic Hudson was also recognized, as was Colonel Jim Johnson, for their work in helping tell our story in the region. So we were tremendously honored to receive that, and we also received a resolution from the Assembly for that, and all of that information will be shared with you in my Executive Director's report. The final item is a legislative update. As you all know, Congress is closed right now, but we still are spending down and eligible to spend down our National Heritage Area grant funds. There are still a number of pieces of legislation which will need to be renewed when Congress reconvenes in the beginning of the year. Those include individual bills to extend our funding authorization, combined bills to extend our funding authorization with 12 other National Heritage Areas, and a program bill which would establish a program of National Heritage Areas and establish baseline funding for heritage areas moving forward. All of those, considering the climate in Washington right now, are very unlikely. So we still have a number of resources, and we are financially stable for the near term. But longer term, we'll need to consider diversifying our funding portfolio, and we do hope that our strategic planning process will give the board direction on the approach we take to doing that. Yes?
If Congress passes a continuing resolution funding the government at current levels, is the Greenway included in that we would be continued funding at current levels?
Last year, that mechanism worked for us.
Yeah.
This year, the interpretation that we're hearing from the National Park Service is that it most likely won't, because the effort is to pass a clean continuing resolution, and that means with no add-ons. Our add-on last year was really an anomaly in that process.
But last year, the Park Service didn't think it was going to work then, so maybe they'll be wrong again. And
we do hope that they'll be wrong again.
Yeah, and that could happen because there is considerable support in Congress for the heritage areas. And Representative Tonko, and some of you are in his district, has been a real leader on that. Right? Is there anybody else? Now that Hinchey's no longer there, but the Hudson River delegation have been strong supporters of your heritage area / Greenway, because the Greenway and the heritage area are basically the same geographic area. Now you have a report, but you've given a lot of it so far, but go on, tell more.
All right, my Executive Director's report will be brief. I just wanted to point out that we saw today an example of success in Dutchess County. We adopted at our last board meeting the Orange County Compact, and they have subsequently adopted it. Ulster County has drafted their Live, Work, Play Hudson River Valley Greenway Compact Plan, and we hope to adopt that at our March board meeting. So with that, we will have 6 Greenway compacts in place. It's only taken 20 or so years to get there, but half of our counties will have, at the adoption of Ulster's plan, done a Greenway compact and are starting to plan by the principles of the Greenway, so we're pleased about that. The main thing I always recognize in my Executive Director's report is the tremendous staff at the Hudson River Valley Greenway. They make this agenda and this day possible, but they also do all the other things that make the Greenway possible. One of the things that came up during our strategic planning workshop, and I put this analogy out there, is that the Greenway is kind of like the Wizard of Oz, like the man behind the curtain. And only a very few people are working behind the curtain to make the Greenway possible. And I'd just like to join me in thanking Beth Campachero, Scott Keller, and our new intern Celeste Roller for all the work that they do to make the Greenway happen. With that, I'll turn it back over to Sarah.
Great. Well, I think this is the moment where we do ask for any new business or any comments from the public. Betsy?
The Thomas Cole National Historic Site is part of the National Park Service, so we are open. There was an erroneous report in the Times-Union that we were closed, so just want to get the word out. Thank you.
Good, okay. Anything else? Yes,
Two things in Putnam and Dutchess County, between Cold Spring and Beacon, the Hudson Fjord Trail, which is a concept that has evolved over the last 6 or 7 years, is actually coming to light, and a master plan is going to be developed over the next 6 to 8 months. It began with a Greenway grant in 2007, I believe, that the Phillipstown Greenway Committee did, and the idea is to connect the Beacon train station and the Cold Spring train station with a continuous hike, bike trail that will extend between the two locations. So we're really excited. There are Greenway grant monies that are going to help pay for the cost of a portion of the cost of the master plan development. So there's great progress, and hopefully the #1 hiking trail, Breakneck Ridge, will actually have a means of getting there from safely for the thousands of hikers that visit it every year. The other thing that I would like to point out is there are cards on the tables here, and be able to get them out. The New York State Land Trust community is having a conservation summit. It's a conference next April. There is a call for presentations. It would be a great place for planners, for community leaders, for those involved in land conservation to participate. It's not only open to land trusts, it's open to anybody that's interested in those, and I encourage you to take it. And if you've got something you'd like to present, here's the means of doing so. So hopefully you can attend as well. Thank you.
Andy, you've been a real leader on this. Kevin Burke, I'm sure you want to say something about the Tower of Victory, though, don't you?
Well, I mean, you're really kind of a leader in that. It's interesting when you talked earlier that Newburgh, the city of Newburgh, is such a challenged place. I think that's something that many of you are aware of. And unfortunately, people who I tell outside the region that are from Newburgh, the first thing that they mention are the kind of negative lists that we're on. We also happen to be home to Washington Clears, and right in the heart of our downtown inner city is this majestic Tower of Victory that was, one of the first and only peace memorials following the Revolutionary War, and it was erected at a time when nations came together after the Civil War. So it's a really beautiful place, and Barney's done such heroic work to kind of galvanize the group together to save it, restore it, and beyond just historical importance, it really would be important, I think, a symbol for Newburgh to indicate that it's not just a place where there are crime stories, but really great opportunities for growth and change. And no one had mentioned that. It's very interesting op-ed last week online. It was everywhere, almost done by David Dorman, who's former lead singer of Talking Heads, and he was talking about how New York City is really under assault. It used to be a place for creative energy and for artists, and more they're being squeezed out by soaring real estate costs. And he mentioned specifically the Hudson, New York may have become the next destination for the artists. But Newburgh is one of those places as well, and we really want to present a better place. No better way to do it than to see the Tower of Victory really as a beacon for people to come and to invest and to move and to create them. Thank you.
You're a real leader on this. And Andy's too shy to note, but of course, the main picture on here is the Bear Mountain Bridge with his land on the right-hand side, right? You
wouldn't call it my land.
Well,
the state's land.
Yes. Well, it's the state and the county and a number of other people, including most, for instance, the Osborne family, which did a tremendous amount of work there. Well, anyway, a great idea, Andy.
Well, and we're also looking for sponsors. So if there are any corporate entities or anybody else who wishes to be a sponsor of this conference, we'd be happy to have that.
Wind?
No. Chair, Lynn Aldridge. Linda has already told you what a wonderful resource the state has in this immediate vicinity. And I'd like to specifically say what a wonderful thing that is happening thanks to Governor Cuomo's enormous commitment of capital funds to State Park, with the Ogden Mill House Scottsburg, the public wall along the highway here, the building itself, the restoration of the great east elevation of the Mills Mansion, and then just a quarter of a mile behind this, the Lighting Hoyt House designed by Calvert Vaux, which has been derelict for so many years, is now undergoing tremendously important and exciting stabilization work, partly funded by the state and partly funded by the federal government. These are tremendous shots in the arm to historic preservation, heritage tourism, and the protection of our cultural heritage in New York State. Right on.
Here, here. Linda.
Can I just add to Mr. Aldridge, who's the former Deputy Commissioner of Historic Preservation in the state, and thank you for being here. But to build on that, at the Hoyt House, which is under construction, just like Henry said, we had prison work crews actually working to take the asbestos out of that, as well as at the historic historic site. So we coordinate with the prison system on a lot of our capital programs where appropriate and possible. But we might be interested in that.
Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew from the S-Trade program, and I thought it was on topic enough to mention that we've got, with the Columbia Land Conservancy, 2 workshops going in the Columbia Green College focused on road maintenance and design. And so the first one at the beginning of October had somebody from Dutchess, Brian Kehoe from Dutchess Planning, come up, talk to 50, 60 people, a willing audience from Columbia County, highway superintendents and planning boards, and it was a great turnout, great talk. And the next one is at the end of October, focusing on maintenance and management of roads in rural settings. So if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer more questions about it, but hopefully that shines some light on Columbia County.
A little too late, it sounds like, for that for your road, but hopefully it will save others. All right, if there are no other issues or questions?
The new meeting.
Well, we have true to form and their incredible efficiency with the staff. We already have the dates set for next year. Please mark your calendars so you can be sure to be part of them. But I think they're all on the agenda. So if there is nothing else, then we will adjourn the meeting. And thank you so much for coming.